Greetings, fellow Alexandrians. Tiki here, and welcome to the Kickback Cafe, the show where we kick back, relax, and talk about anything but Disney. And today we have a decidedly non-Disney topic on our hands. I really want to say this is the first time I've ever talked about The Walking Dead on this channel. I mean, I certainly have referenced it in the past, much to Blue Dragon 5's dismay most of the time, because he's not into the horror genre. But I don't believe I've ever actually made a video about The Walking Dead, just a full video kind of laying out my thoughts and whatnot and so on and so forth. So before I get into the kind of, admittedly a bit attention-seeking title of Has The Walking Dead Jumped the Shark, which I do think is kind of a serious issue that I want to kind of get out of the way, because I think there's a very, very specific reason, a very specific point in this series that I can like pinpoint specifically to where I think the show's in danger mode of having jumped the shark. But before I get into that, let me just talk about my overall experiences with the show. I actually was into the comics a while before the show came out. I was into the comics, let's see, maybe around, it was the same year that Watchmen came out. So I think 2008, 2009, somewhere right around there, like right around the Watchmen Dark Knight era, you know, the late 2000s. That's when I got into graphic novels. So I like collected Watchmen and Killing Joke, all that good stuff. Sandman, I had a bunch of Sandmans. Awesome series. But another one of the series that I collected was The Walking Dead, and I especially collected the compendiums, I believe they are. So I have 3 of the compendiums. So I think at this point in the comic book, I'm pretty much caught up to where they are on the show. I don't know. I haven't really. I just bought all 3 of those, and I just breezed through them. So I have to go back and see exactly like where in the storyline I am in the comics compared to the show. But in the comics, I definitely have gone to Negan, and Negan is definitely something that I am anticipating. But point being, I was very familiar with The Walking Dead, very familiar with the characters and the story and everything like that before the show even came on air. So, of course, me being a big Breaking Bad fan, you know, when I see the Walking Dead commercials starting to air on AMC, I get interested. And the show, my God, the show has taken on a life of its own, and it's become like so much more popular than the comics even ever were. It's kind of crazy. The show is like so mainstream now, and that's fine. I mean, it's definitely a show that takes risk and has balls in certain areas. Still to this day, one of my all-time favorite moments of the show is when Sophia walks out of that fucking barn and Rick has to put her down. I mean, that is just some heavy, heavy shit. And I like how the show kind of goes into the moral sort of side of the thing. And right now, at this point in the show, it's just so to the point where walkers, except when they're in big giant herds, are essentially mild inconveniences. And then, you know, the groups, the people are the threats. And that's something that the comic did brilliantly, and that's something that the show's doing okay as well. So overall, I'm a fan of the show. I think some seasons have been weaker than others. I frankly thought that they kind of shat the bed a little bit on season 3. I really didn't like season 3. I thought that thing, besides a couple choice episodes, was a slog to get through. Andrea was just fucking brutal that season, and thank God she got killed off. Oh my God. It was difficult. It was difficult. Season 4 is actually probably my favorite season of the show, dare I say. I actually thought that they redeemed the governor character with how the governor ended, because I did not really think that they were doing the governor justice in season 3. I'm still pissed he didn't get that mustache, though. Make no mistake, I'm still pissed about the mustache. Especially because he had a full beard. You know, it's like, just shave off the beard and keep the mustache. But I digress. The really kind of the stretch of episodes in season 4 that really got me hooked and kind of reeled back into the show after season 3 was that whole road to terminus storyline, and especially episodes like, oh my god, the one oh, I forget exactly what the episode's called, but the one with Carol and Tyrese, where, and the two little girls, and the shit that goes down with that. Just intense, really intense. Season 5 started out incredibly strong with the Terminus storyline and Gareth and the cannibals and everything like that. 3 incredibly strong episodes, followed by the hospital storyline, which was shit. I mean, the hospital storyline has got to be the worst thing that's happened on this show ever. It's that, oh god. Like, season 3, Andrea was difficult, but that whole hospital storyline was just a mess. And filler, like, just so many filler episodes of just doing nothing, and just like, oh, here's another episode, and it's like, instead of seeing these 2 characters going around looking for Beth and accomplishing nothing, we have these 2 characters going around looking for Beth and accomplishing nothing. Yay! Season 5, however, did get really fucking good in the second half with Alexandria, which is, of course, something as a comic fan that I've been waiting for a long time. So it definitely had its up and down moments, for sure. But I think once the second half of season 5 hit, things got really good. I hope that's the case now for season 6. I really do, because it's been rough with season 6 so far. Now, after I've laid out my thoughts, let me get into why I think this show is actually in danger of jumping the shark. So, what have we seen in season 6 so far? The opening episode was really fucking good. First of all, I just love seeing the show use the black and white, because it's just like, oh, here's what the show would look like if it was more faithful to the look of the comics, which is awesome. So I love that black and white framing device in the first episode. And then, of course, I really liked the episode with the wolf attack. That was good. Episode 3 was really intense. Of course, we had Glenn's death. All the air quotes in the world can't match the air quotes when I say that. Death. Okay, here's the crux of my issue here. Oh man, episode 3 was intense, and it ended with, like, Glenn being killed. Again, all the air quotes in the world couldn't justify how fucking air quotey it is. And of course it ended with Rick trapped in that bus with all those walkers surrounding him. Episode 4 was fine. Like, I don't think the Morgan episode needed to be an hour and a half long. I really don't. I feel like there's some scenes in that could have just been cut, and it could have just been an hour-long episode. But having said that, it was a good episode for sure. It was definitely kind of more of a short story in the Walking Dead universe. You know what I mean? It was definitely kind of just a side story, but it was a really damn good side story for sure. Episode 5 is one of the worst episodes in the history of The Walking Dead, I think. I really do. Episode 5 was brutal. Episode 5 was, oh my god. That was last week's episode. So let's just get this out of the way, why I think the show is just, if not jumped the shark yet. Notice that I formed the title of this video in the form of a question and not just a definitive statement like, oh, The Walking Dead has jumped the shark. No, I'm just simply asking, is The Walking Dead jumping the shark? Glenn, let's just get it out of the way right now. I am beyond infuriated and beyond frustrated with the way that this show has been handling the Glenn thing. And frankly, I think it's kind of classless on their part. I think it's an obvious fucking ploy for ratings and for drama, and I think it's so crystal clear and out in the open what the show is doing that it's just fucking annoying. So we see Glenn literally get his fucking intestines, ripped out from him by the walkers as he's got this terrified, horrified look on his face. he's pretty damn dead, right? I mean, that's what we would think. And in the moment when I saw that episode, I was like, holy shit, they just killed Glenn. Like, what the fuck? You know, I was blown away because, of course, being a comic fan, you know, spoiler alert, Glenn dies another way in the comics, and it's much more iconic than just like some douche fucking, you know, basically just ruining it for him. But I'm just so frustrated with this whole. I mean, it started with social media and people saying like, "Well, Glenn might not really be dead," and now I think the show itself and the producers of the show have just taken it to a whole other level. They cut Steve Yeun from the credits, and last week was just a ridiculous slog of like, okay, is Glenn alive? Is Glenn alive? Is Glenn alive? We're not going to show you. We're not going to show you because that's the mid-season finale. But is he alive? Is he alive? Is he alive? And it was just fucking infuriating. I mean, when Maggie and Neil were in that sewer grate or whatever, I really wanted to see a scene kind of reminiscent of Sophia coming out of the barn where Glenn, as a walker, comes right up to that grate and Maggie has to face him. I don't think we're going to get that scene. I know exactly what's going to happen in the fucking mid-season finale. It's going to be Glenn walking up kind of battered, kind of bruised, but okay. And that's exactly what's frustrating me so much about this whole thing. Glenn is obviously a fan favorite character. Glenn is someone who, if the show did decide to kill off, to really officially kill off, I could definitely see the show, you know, there'd be some backlash for sure, because he is popular. Although, frankly, I've never really been all that into Glenn. I think the Glenn in the comic books is a more fully realized character, whereas I think this Glenn in The Walking Dead, he's fine. He's fine. He's certainly kind of a moral compass of the show, but he's just like, he's not the most compelling character compared to like the Ricks and the Morgans of the world, or even, you know, the Carols, I think, point being, I think the show has a lot more interesting characters other than Glenn to kind of carry it. I think Glenn is definitely a very likable character, which is why people would be upset if he died, but I don't think he's the character with the most sort of layers and nuance to him. So yeah, I don't know. It's just, the show knows exactly what it's doing. It's just like, it's teasing the crap out of it, and it's like, the show is just completely, I feel like the show is mocking us, and that's what's pissing me off so much about this whole thing. There's no reason why this storyline should go on until the mid-season finale, except because they need a fucking big event at the mid-season. Well, guess what? You have Negan, you have the Saviors, like, couldn't the mid-season finale have been Negan coming out and actually doing the proper Glenn death from the comic books? Couldn't that have been a good mid-season finale? Just boggles my mind that this show kind of has to have these like events, like these mid-season finale things, and the mid-season finales are always shit for the most part. I mean, besides, of course, you know what? I take back that statement. I just think the season 5 mid-season finale and just all of the second half of the first half of season 5. Tell me that's not a redundant sentence, but you know what I mean. The hospital storyline was awful, and I feel like we're kind of getting a repeat of that. We're kind of getting like, I mean, thank God in the hospital storyline it wasn't just like, oh, is Beth dead or is she not dead? Because this is what we're getting with Glenn, and it's just stupid. Because I just know he's alive. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. This is why I'm posing this as a question, not a definitive fact. If Glenn is dead, if Glenn does get killed, if we see him as a walker, or if we see his dead body, or what the hell ever, if he is proven to be dead, then this show has not jumped the shark, and I look forward to many more seasons to come. And if he's alive, then goddamn it, they cast Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Negan, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan is like perfect casting in my opinion for Negan. Like, now that he's been cast, I literally can't think of anyone else to play Negan other than him. So I'll certainly still be sticking around because I have been hyped up for Negan for seasons upon seasons now. I am so ready for this character to be a part of this TV show, but it's going to come at a cost. If Glenn is alive, it's going to come at a cost. And you know what that cost is? That cost is now every single time, and this is exactly why I think the show is in danger of jumping the shark with this Glenn thing. Every single time from now until the end of this fucking show, if Glenn is in fact alive, every single time we see a character presumably get killed off, we're going to wonder. We're going to wonder if the writers are going to pull this cheap shit again, where they clearly show the character. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't buy into this whole, like, oh, the other guy fell on top of Glenn and Glenn's reacting to the other guy getting his guts torn out. No, Glenn's not reacting to that. He's reacting to getting his guts torn out. I'm actually, like, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the direction that Steve Yeun was given for that scene. You know, like, just react as if you're about to die, because that's certainly what it looked like in his face. It didn't look like someone who was in the situation where someone else was being eaten alive and he had to kind of like go down to the fucking bottom of the dumpster and somehow fucking, it's going to be cheap no matter how they explain it. And that's my big problem with it. It's going to be fucking cheap. It's manipulative is what it is. It's totally manipulative of the audience of the show. I can see them pulling the same sort of shit with Daryl and, you know, season 7, like episode 3 of season 7, something bad happens to Daryl and we don't know if he's alive or not. And then, ooh, it turns out he's alive. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm getting at? It's not just the fact that they implied that Glenn died and now Glenn has a really, really, really good chance at actually coming back, especially with the ending of last episode and presumably him being over the walkie-talkie, everything like that. Again, it annoys the hell out of me that they just keep teasing it out and teasing it out and teasing it out. It's like we can't just get it resolved. It has to be like this big major issue that has to go on until the fucking mid-season finale, because God knows this show doesn't have enough on its plate that they couldn't craft a mid-season finale without the cheap-ass reveal that Glenn's alive. But like I said, if this show surprises me and Glenn is actually dead, bravo. Bravo. That would be a ballsy move, especially after all this sort of build up and teasing and whatever. If he is actually dead, I have no problem with any of this, and it's basically a non-factor. If he's alive, then like I said, I think if Glenn's alive, it just pretty much just cheapens every single major death going forward on this show. Because basically, unless we see a character die, turn into a walker, and then fucking get killed off as a walker, with Glenn alive, if Glenn is alive, it's like every single fucking situation we're gonna question it now. Like, even if Negan uses Lucille on someone in a very Glenn-style way, it's like, oh, well, is he actually dead, or did he just get major head trauma, and is he alive? I don't know. That's my whole issue with it. My whole issue is that it's going to sap some of the suspense out of the show. It's going to just, every single time that a character dies now, it's just going to be like, oh, are they going to pull a Glenn? Are they going to pull a Glenn? That's kind of going to become a verb now with the show. Pulling a Glenn is in, like, you know, presumably killing off a major character only to reveal that they're alive several episodes down the stretch. The show is doing it now. It's annoying as fuck. I don't think any of the fans are actually pleased with it. I don't think any of the fans of the show are actually like, oh, I really like not knowing if Glenn's alive or not. It's just annoying. It's just like, just give us an answer and move on. This show, it annoys the piss out of me that we're still basically dealing with the aftermath of the first episode of the season. It's like, this seed it's moving incredibly slow after an incredibly fast-paced first few episodes. It's like we had that whole thing of herding that big group of walkers away, and then the wolf attack. And that's it. That's like all that's happened on this show is, is moving that herd in the wolf attack. That's literally it. That's all that's happened on the season. And then the rest of it has just been a decent Morgan flashback, and then a bunch of like, oh, is Glenn alive or is he dead? I don't know. Also, I just want to say last episode wasn't terrible by any stretch. I thought episode 5, the week before last, was terrible. I really do. It was like basically like an Alexandria-centric episode with a bunch of red shirt filler characters that we couldn't care less about. Granted, I know the Alexandrians have to have, character development somewhere, but it just felt like a wasted episode doing that. Last night's episode was actually decent. The only thing that I thought was really, really grabbing about it was that one scene with presumably the introduction of the Saviors. Presumably, although I've actually kind of said that before with this show and proven wrong. Like, oh, it's the Saviors. But having said that, with Negan being cast, I think it's pretty fair to say that the group that we saw last night with the one guy that had to get his arm cut off, those are the Saviors. I mean, it's pretty damn clear with Negan being cast and all that. I feel like I'm running in circles, and I feel like this blog isn't really making much sense. I apologize for that. It's early in the morning. I just kind of woke up, but I've just been stewing over this Glenn thing for several weeks now, because how much more effective would it have been if that was all you saw of Glenn, if that was it? It would be incredibly effective just in the sense of anyone could die on this show at any moment, and we just don't know. I felt the same way. I felt that exact same way when they killed Tyrese last season, right? Like literally the episode after they killed Beth. I was just like, oh my God, Tyrese is gone. Holy shit. Like anything could happen now. But now with Glenn, it's just like, if he's dead, then it's a long con that the producers are playing on us that might pay off if he is actually dead. But my gut instinct and logic tells me that he is not dead and that he's going to come walking up just fine, and Maggie and him are going to have a big sappy fucking reunion and whatever, and that's going to be basically the whole crux of the mid-season finale. So not only does this cheapen Glenn moving forward, and it basically makes Glenn into the equivalent of like, in reality, I'm sorry, this is going to be kind of a weird analogy, but it's basically like in a reality show where, let's say like Big Brother, when someone gets evicted and then comes back into the house, it's like, well, they're in the house, they're there, but they were already evicted. So it's like they can't win the game, logically. And even if they do win the game, there's like an asterisk next to their name. So in a sense, I feel like that's going to be a similar thing with Glenn, where it's like, okay, now no matter what they do with him, even if they do give him like the big ceremonious issue number 100 death by Lucille that was in the comic books, it's going to feel cheap because they literally just fucking killed Glenn and then brought him back. So that's my issue with it. Some people are speculating that that iconic issue number 100 death is actually going to go to Daryl. If that's the case, that would be a ballsy as fuck move, and I would applaud them for it, but I don't know. It cheapens Glenn's character to have him still be alive after they pull some shit like this. It really does cheapen his character. I wish that they just had him made it out. I wish that this whole thing hadn't happened. Because now, like I said, when he actually dies, you're just going to not feel as much for it because we already went through the feels of losing Glenn and then we got him back. And like I said, just repeating this point one last time before I sign off, it's just every single time we see a death on the show from now on that's somewhat ambiguous whether or not they die, it's just going to be like, oh, are they pulling Glenn or not? So there's still plenty of things to like about this show. Obviously I think most of the cast is really, really good. I don't think they use the cast that well. I think like distributing the screen time has been kind of like all over the place and wonky as fuck this season. We barely saw any Daryl at all until last episode. We haven't seen much of Michonne at all. It's like we have these awesome kind of like iconic comic book characters that they're just not using, which is frustrating. And yet we have a whole Jesse-centric episode 2 weeks ago, but I digress. There's still a lot to like, and again, no matter what happens, even if Glenn is revealed to be alive in the most implausible, over-the-top, schmaltzy way possible, I'm still going to be invested in it, specifically because I know Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Negan is coming, and that is definitely going to be the element that pulls me through and keeps me addicted to this show no matter what happens with this Glenn thing. But I feel like if Glenn is alive, then some of the suspense of the show will be gone, and some of just killing the characters in general is going to... I feel like I'm not using my words right. Like, just the death of characters in general on this show is going to be cheapened. And that's the risk they're taking with this fucking Glenn situation. It's, you know, it's like I said, if they pull this shit with Rick, if Rick gets into a major... Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, but it pisses me off that we have that whole cliffhanger of Rick in the bus or in the RV with thousands of walkers swarming him, and then the very next episode he's just pulling up to Alex. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, did that scene of Rick escaping those walkers just get left on the cutting room floor or something? You don't fucking end your episode with a cliffhanger like that and then just straight up not explain how we got out of that situation. You know what? That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, let's say Glenn just walks up and he's just injured but alive, and they don't explain how he got out of that fucking trash can or garbage, you know, whatever, dumpster or whatever. That's what I fear is going to happen. I fear that it's just going to be like, suddenly Glenn is in Alexandria and he's all fucking beat up, but he's okay. Yay, rejoice because your favorite character isn't dead. Except for the fact that now every time we try and do something like this, you're going to be suspicious of us. And every time we even try and kill off a character in a legit kind of way, you're going to be suspicious of us. That's the danger. That's the risk that they are pulling with this Glenn shit. And I hope to God that he's dead for that reason. I really do. I am rooting hope against hope that Glenn is dead, specifically to maintain the dramatic integrity of this show. Because if he's alive, then I think it's a new level of cheap that this show's gone to. It's just a new level of just like, let's explicitly show a character die. Just fucking explicitly show a character get his guts torn off. And I don't want to hear about, you know, the other guy was on top of Glenn or what the fuck ever, because it sure didn't look like that. It looked like, this is Glenn's chest. This is Glenn's face. Glenn's chest is getting ripped. That's exactly what it looked like. So if they're going to pull some shit like that where he's alive and it was the other guy on top of him or what the fuck ever, it's just an element of the show that it's just the dramatic tension has just kind of been killed a little bit. So I'm going in circles. I've basically repeated my point like 5 times. You all know what I'm talking about. If Glenn is alive, then this show is going to have some serious problems moving forward in terms of like the audience even legitly believing that a character's... Because I mean, how graphic do you need to get where the character's literally getting his chest torn up and then he still ends up being alive? I mean, outside of just like a straight like shot to the goddamn head, it's like there's going to be every situation that they could possibly kill off a character with could be like, oh, but he maybe just got out of it like Glenn did. And it's just cheap. It's cheap as hell to show a character die in that way, a fan favorite character, to explicitly show him die and then to just turn around and be like, oh no, he didn't actually die. Keep in mind, we still don't know for sure if Glenn's alive or not, but all my instincts are telling me that he's alive. All my gut feelings are telling me he's alive. If he's not alive, if he's actually dead, if in the mid-season finale we see Maggie have to fucking put down the Glenn Walker or whatever the hell, then we can just move on, look forward to Negan, and hopefully have an awesome rest of the season. But unfortunately, if Glenn does turn out to be alive, even with the awesomeness of Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Negan on the horizon, this show is going to come with an asterisk. And that asterisk is characters that appear dead may not actually be dead. That's the risk that this show's going with. So that's all I have to say. Like I said, I've been repeating myself, so I apologize for repeating myself. But yeah, thanks for watching, and crossing my fingers that the dramatic integrity of the show actually holds up and Glenn is actually dead. Not that I dislike Glenn, I just dislike being dicked around by the producers like this. All right, so stay bloody, everyone. I have no catchphrase to go out on. I really don't. So with that, I'll just quote Abraham then. I'll just quote Abraham, because Abraham's quote is actually like kind of a definitive sort of statement on what I am feeling right now, in that loose ends make my ass itch. And this is the mother of all loose ends, and my ass is pretty itchy right about now. So with that in mind, have a good day, folks. And let's just hope for the dramatic integrity of the show that Glenn is actually dead. All right.